in this book, Shanin Specter.
Well, thank you, Brian, very much. I see that a battery has just been placed in this microphone, and apparently none of the previous speakers have been recorded, so I think we're going to have to start all over again. I hope you don't mind. I do have the feeling that everything has been said, but not everyone has said it. So let me offer a couple of observations, if I may. First of all, I'd like to recognize my mother, Joan Specter, and my wife, Tracy Specter, and three of our girls, Perry and Lily and Hattie Specter. This is a great honor to be asked to give this keynote address. Congratulations to Brian Lockman and to Francine Schertzer on this tremendous accomplishment, a fantastic 15-hour oral history, and now this terrific book, which is the distillation of those 15 hours. My father's life has been the subject of a lot of writing. He was covered nearly every day during his nearly 50-year career in public life. There was an early book on his work in the Senate by political scientist Richard Fenno called Learning to Legislate. There were his 3 books. There is an upcoming book by Professor Evan Lane. But of all the books that have been written so far, this is by far the best. Why is that? I think it's because these interviews occurred after my father left the Senate. When he left politics, whatever shred of concern that he might have about the last election and the next election was gone. That honesty, that striking, unbridled, unmitigated candor is evident in this book. You saw one brutally candid exchange on the film earlier this evening, but it bears repeating. It was Brian's question to my father, at what point in your life did you notice that it didn't matter whether you were Jewish or not? And I'm in the world of asking questions and even teaching about how to ask questions. And there's an aspect to that question, if you don't mind my being marginally critical, which strikes me, and that is that the question assumed that being Jewish didn't matter in my father's life at the point when it was asked. After all, he'd been in the Senate for 30 years. He'd been DA of Philadelphia, elected for 2 terms. But my father's answer was a stark recognition that it did matter that he was Jewish. He said, as you saw, never. And then the hesitation, maybe tomorrow, maybe not, probably not. And I think that Ed Rendell could probably testify to this as well. Anybody in politics who is Jewish knows that that is the answer. Of course it matters. It will always matter. I've been asked many times what I think was my father's greatest contribution to public life. And he would typically say what Ed Rendell talked about a few minutes ago, which was his work on the magisterial system in Philadelphia. That was work that he did when he was 34 years old, largely alone, after he finished his work on the Warren Commission staff, appointed by then Governor Scranton to undertake that investigation. Why did he feel that way? Because the magistrates had preyed on the poor, the disadvantaged, the gay, minorities, folks that didn't have protection in Philadelphia, who didn't have representation, who didn't have access to justice. He felt that getting rid of those parasites on our system was his greatest accomplishment. Some people would say that his greatest or perhaps most infamous contribution, again, was something that Ed talked about, which was the single bullet theory. And it may be that centuries from now, that will be his contribution that will be the most remembered. He certainly loved being a prosecutor. He would say that the best job he ever had was being an assistant DA. And probably Ron and Ed know what that means to be an assistant DA, and the love of, and Jim, and the love of the courtroom and what you can do for your community in that position. He said that every problem in the world came to the United States, and that every problem in the United States came to the United States Senate. And I would add to that he felt that all of those problems were his problems too. And in his 30 years in the Senate, he tried to address them. He liked meeting with the world's despots, whether they were Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi or the Assads of Syria, father and son, with whom he met 20 times. Yes, he really liked having those meetings. That's just the kind of guy he was. And he thought very simply that in order to deal with the world's problems, you had to talk to the people who were causing those problems. He tried very hard to get into North Korea, to meet with the ruling elite. But in his 30 years in the Senate, that was one group he could not get in to see. Perhaps we are seeing the results of that failure of dialogue today, not just his inability to talk to them, but perhaps the rest of us and our inability to talk to them as well. This past weekend, I had the occasion to think of my father again as I saw the racist violence in Charlottesville and the tepid response from Bedminster. My mind went back to 1985 when President Reagan agreed to go to a cemetery in Germany in which Nazi war criminals were buried. My father sharply criticized the visit, even though he was in the same party as the president. We don't see too much intra-party hell-raising today, do we? As I think everyone here knows and has been talked about by many of you in your own way, my father highly valued his political independence. Ed called it courage. Others have used somewhat different words. I would characterize it as political independence. He felt it served the interests of Pennsylvania and the nation for him to make individualized judgments on the issues that came before the Senate. When he arrived in the Senate, the number of moderates in both caucuses was very large. Today, moderates are nearly extinct, and bipartisan voting is rare. A couple of weeks ago, seeing Senator McCain turn a thumbs down on the health care bill took me back to February of 2009, when our nation was facing, as Ed has referenced, the most severe economic crisis that we had faced and have faced since the Great Depression. And we had a new president, a Democrat, who was proposing a stimulus program, and the Republican Party was lockstep against it. I recall discussing that vote with my father in early February 2009, on the weekend before he cast that vote. He said to me that he was not sure how he would feel about the vote if he were 59 instead of being 79, but that at 79, it wasn't a close call. He was staring into his political grave, but his attitude was, so be it, which was exactly what we saw him say on the film a little while ago. My father cast the deciding vote on the stimulus, which cost him, remarkably, his party affiliation, his seniority, and his seat in the Senate. But he followed Dante's sentiment that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of moral crisis preserve their neutrality. And this, I think, was his greatest accomplishment in the Senate. His willingness to look at each matter independently with attention to detail and what he would call close inspection, utilizing a mind that was brilliant and resourceful, that was energetic and determined. This 15 hours of video, now organized into this 342-page written history, is excellent precisely because it allows all of us to see how all of those formidable personal qualities could be concentrated and harnessed on the matter at hand, be it a case, a campaign, a personal problem, a debate, a vote, or the making of a law or its enforcement. It is these lessons that I hope may guide current and future leaders to help shape a better, safer, and more just society and world. Thank you.